Favorite castle, George?
Favorite castle?
Uh-huh.
Let me see. I'm very fond of my castles. And of course, Winterfell is where it all began, so that's probably got to be the choice, Winterfell.
And what would you have based Winterfell on? Did you have a real world castle in your head when you thought about that one?
Not directly, no. It's a fairly simple castle. Its most distinctive feature is the double wall with the moat between, which I've never seen a real castle that has that particular architectural feature, but I like the size of it and the godswood in the center of it, and it's really more of a town. My castles are bigger than most real-world castles, by and large.
Especially because they go down as well.
Yes. I'm also very fond of a pike on the Iron Islands, which was actually based on a couple of Scottish castles. But the idea of a castle that's on these sea stacks that are very inaccessible and are linked only by these bridges and so forth. It would be a miserable place to live. It would be cold and damp and wet, but explains a lot about the personality of the Ironborn.
You've got a lot of tunnels.
What can I say? They're cool.
Yeah, they are.
I do actually like caves, I live in New Mexico. We have Carlsbad Caverns, one of the great cave systems in the world. I just visited there again last year on the way to Worldcon, and I've been there a dozen times over the years, and I've been to other caves when I travel, and they're endlessly fascinating. And if I was 30 years younger and in much better physical condition, of all the sports, I would love to be a caver or an explorer. I mean, it's the last true realm of exploration on the planet Earth. It's the only place that at least a theoretical possibility exists that you could crawl through a hole and go to a place that no other human being has ever stood, has ever seen. And, the light of your lantern could be the first light that's ever fallen in this secret place below the earth. And, that's, I don't know, I find that tremendously exciting. But it is probably akin, I know you, Jane, are a rock climber who clambers to the top of mountains. And it might be somewhat the same appeal.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah.
Because I'm very claustrophobic. I do not like enclosed spaces, and I'm well known when I'm climbing never to get into cracks or chimneys. I will always do something far more difficult up the front face of something.
I, on the other hand, do not like falling off mountains.
Oh, well, I love that. We did talk about climbing when you were doing your scene for when they went up the wall.
That's right. Jane was my technical resource when for the climb when Jon Snow and the Wildlings had to go up that 700 feet of ice wall, and what that would be like climbing that with medieval climbing equipment.
Hard.
Yeah.
I think is the answer to that. Do you remember the first story you ever wrote, George?
The first story I ever wrote?
Ever.
Yeah. I never finished any of my early stories that I wrote as a kid. They were all beginnings.
That's not a good
endless
sign.
Number of beginnings.
Editors.
There were these spaceman toys, aliens, that were sold in 5 and dime shops in New Jersey when I was a kid. As an adult, I collect toys and figurines, and I've become somewhat knowledgeable about this. So I now know, from the vantage point of a collector, that these were aliens made by a company called Miller, and they're generally referred to as the Miller aliens. They were produced in the 1950s and sold through Kresge's and Woolworths and similar stores in large bins for 15 cents each. They were made of extruded plastic, which was this kind of waxy, cheap plastic that like broke if you looked at it crooked and couldn't be glued back together to my great frustration. So they were very fragile things, but they were great aliens. They all had what planet they came from on the base, and they were weird looking. There was a snake guy, and there was like a giant beetle guy who had like 8 legs, and 2 of them had ray guns of different designs, and there was a 2-headed robot, and there was all that. So I got the whole set, you know, and some of them were hard to get because the beetle guy and the snake guy were always breaking, and you'd go through the bins, and all the beetle guys are broken again, but I finally got an intact beetle guy. And I made up stories about them. I decided, well, who are all these guys? It had what planet they came from, but they didn't have names. So I invented names for all of them. And I decided the Martian guy who was green, he had a big green head, he was holding a little rocket ship. He was the head, his name was Jarn, and they were space pirates, and he was the captain and the mastermind because he had a big head, he must be smart. And, and I invented all sorts. There was one little guy from Orion. He was yellow, and he was holding this weird sort of weapon. The toy was, it looked like a drill. So I decided he was the torturer. So even as a little kid, I was thinking of torture and maiming and so forth. But they had all sorts of great adventures, Jarn and his space pirates, and those were the first stories I wrote.
Did you share them with anybody else?
No, they were just for me. Just for me. Printed out in my big chief tablets in my hand.
When did you sell your first professional story? What was the first thing you sold?
For me, it was a story called The Hero, which I sold to Galaxy. I sold it in the summer of 1970, and it appeared in, I believe, the February 71 issue of Galaxy magazine. I had actually written it several years earlier. When I was in college, I went to Northwestern University, just north of Chicago, and I was a journalism major, so I was writing a lot for journalism courses, but I wanted to write short stories and fiction. And I would take creative writing courses and write it for that, but I was also always looking for an opportunity to write short stories for other courses. I remember once I took a lot of history courses, and I would frequently ask my history professors if I could write a historical fiction instead of a term paper. And some of them actually said yes. So it was actually a course in Scandinavian history that I was taking, and the professor said yes, and I wrote a story about the Russo-Finnish War of 1808. The surrender of the great fortress of Sveaborg. Wow. A great mystery in Finnish history. And the professor liked it so well that not only did he give me an A, but he sent it off to a professional magazine. So that was where I got my first rejection slip. But it was a very nice rejection slip. It was, the editor said very nice things and said, well, we don't publish fiction, but if we did, we might like to use this story because it's good. So I said, hey, this sending out stories and getting rejection slips isn't as painful as I thought it would be, so I'll try it. And I took some of the stories that I had written for creative writing courses, some science fiction, some non, and started sending them out to magazines. And one of them was The Hero, and it got a number of rejection slips, but eventually it sold.
Wow. Do you remember how much you got paid for it?
$94.
There you go. And what
Don't laugh. $94 is a lot of money in those days, man.
It was.
1970,
yeah.
you could go to town for $94. It was.
I
had $94 in my bank account. I was pretty excited.
Did you go to town? What did you spend it on?
What did I what?
What did you spend it on?
I don't remember offhand, but, beer probably figured into it somewhere.